Hi, Patreon supporters. It's the video time. This is when we talk directly to you on video. Boom. I got nothing else. Dan, do you want to show them your cup?
I was just
Stop doing that.
Well, it depends. I wanted it was either me in real life or me doing a boomerang.
Oh, totally.
This is look at this fun color changing cup. Ready? It's gonna turn my. Oh, exciting! I'm a child. I know.
Well, you have a child, so I suppose it's good.
Yeah.
So, guys, for Patreon, we are recording this. It is July right now.
Yep.
We're trying to get ahead, as always, because Dan's got babies coming.
I got some babies coming, and they're gonna happen. Baby extraction is imminent. Yeah.
Well, I would hope so.
Yeah, we'll see.
We wouldn't want her to walk around like that forever.
Yeah.
Molly Cooper, stop it.
Things are getting real. So we're trying to get some last episodes in here, and I'll probably take a paternity leave for the end of the year or whatever part of season 7. I don't know. We'll see. So, but things are happening. Lots of good stuff coming. Thanks everybody for your well wishes, and you're awesome. I don't know. I shouldn't touch the microphone.
And like Danielle. Nope, I'm Danielle. Like Dan said, he's going to be taking a paternity leave so he can do some well-deserved time with his.
He's going to be taking a paternity leave.
Did I just do that?
Just for a second.
Don't make fun of me. Anyway, he's going to be doing that. And so that we're still putting out episodes for you guys. We're going to be bringing on some, I think, guest co-hosts along with me, which I am very jazzed and excited about.
Wait a second. There are not going to be any co-hosts. I am the co-host. You're going to bring on guests, but there will be no co-hosts. Okay?
Well, I'm going to be talking with people. Yes. It's just not going to be me talking by myself the entire time. So
I would listen to that. I would listen to that. I'm going to listen to that podcast at 3 o'clock in the morning with a baby in each arm.
There you go.
That's it.
Are you good? You working out a knot? What are you doing?
Yeah, I was just working out a knot there. Okay. See the the Puttering or the podcast people they don't get to see all those weird behind the scenes things.
You guys get to see it all here, folks.
All right, folks.
All right. So we're recording an episode today. We're going to record another episode right after it, and then I'm going to eat lunch. And I'm very excited for lunch today because Dan, have you ever been to IKEA and had lunch in IKEA?
Heck yeah.
Okay, so I get very excited about this. You know the salad they have with the raw, thinly sliced salmon, and it has this dill mustard. It's amazing. I went and picked up our car from the car accident we were in. All's good there.
Nice.
Coming back, I needed to avoid some major traffic. And coming back, I was like, well, I'll just stop at IKEA because they sell just the salmon and that sauce, dressing, whatever it is. And then I got some of the greens. So that's my lunch today, and I'm very, very excited.
Smoked salmon lox is one of my favorite things. I love it so much. It's delicious. Yeah. It's delicious. All right, let's make a podcast
now that I've made everybody hungry and jealous about my cuisine.
I don't know what I'm going to have for lunch. I'll have to figure that out afterwards. All right. And in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome, everyone. Nope, we already do that. Anyway, here we are, podcasting.
We look at us podcasting, Dan.
It's kind of like we know what we're doing.
Well, I wouldn't go that far.
This this is a new topic for us. We have never done an episode just on ways to save money. We've spitter spattered. We've done some a budget episode, but not one just on ways to the prices of things, not prices of things, on ways to just reduce that overall total budget. No,
right?
And I feel me,
Dan and I always come from the place of, when you go into the idea of we're going to have a wedding and we're going to plan this wedding to whatever scale it is, whether you're investing $1,000, $100,000, or whatever in between or above or below, we always come from the place of whatever you're investing, whatever you're comfortable investing, we want to put you, we want to give you the knowledge and the tools and the resources to make the best decision possible for what you're comfortable investing. That said, being in this industry for the 9-10 years that both of us have been in it now, we've seen ways that and areas that people have spent money that they didn't necessarily need to. And that's kind of what we're sharing, kind of our ways and things to go about it to not spend more than you need to. Yeah. Does that make sense? So this isn't about like, this is how to do it cheap. That's not what it's about.
No. Yeah. Have you ever, well, let me put it this way. One of the things that they say is like, if you go grocery shopping without a list, it's the worst thing in the entire world because you end up just buying whatever. Or if you go grocery shopping hungry, even worse, right? Like you spend an extraordinary amount of money. If you have a plan for your wedding, and I'm talking budgets for everything, and even ways to, be frugal or whatever, or like, I'm going to liken it to grocery shopping again. If you're like, all right, I know we've got 5 dinners this week. We need to make sure that we hit those 5 dinners. Those are the most important ones. And then you fill in around that, right? Like you've got a couple of things that are really important, and we're going to talk about this later. But there are ways to like set this up from the very beginning to make sure you've got a plan for how to do it all 12 months or all 6 months or all 3 months, and make sure that you're not, flying off the radar or flying off the off of the budget plan and going off into crazy territory.
Crazy town. Yeah. And this is a lot of the stuff we're going to be talking about is going to be incredibly beneficial if you're still on the early side of getting engaged and planning the wedding. That said, there's a lot of these things that we're going to talk about that it's not going to be too late to course correct on some of it. Some of them you're like, well, we already did that, so that's out, and it is what it is.
Course correct? Great.
Yeah,
word.
Course correct.
I'm over here saying crazy territory, and you saying course correct. It's not going to be too late to course correct for you all out there. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, so we are specifically going to touch on 8 big ways to save money on your wedding.
So good.
And then we're going to nicely wrap it up with some ways that we are going to say where we think you should not try to save money. Things that you should not do, which are things that we've touched on before, but I'm excited for this episode.
Yeah,
so,
not going to be any surprises at the end of this episode.
Yeah, exactly. Dan, shall we dive into number 1?
Yeah, the first one is like the biggest, easiest, most simple one possible.
That's not simple. Take that back.
No,
it is not simple.
Yes, it is. No, I should say.
No, it's not.
In theory, let's put it this way. It is the easiest one to understand. Big wedding, a lot of people, more expensive. Small wedding, less people, less expensive.
It is the most obvious. Yes.
It's the most obvious, right?
Cutting back on your guest list is
difficult. Very.
Insanely difficult. But it is your guest list size is the number one factor when it comes to what you're likely going to need to be investing in your wedding day. By nature, more wedding guests equals more space that you need, more tables, more chairs, more linens, more centerpieces, more decor, more food, more drink, bigger transportation, more place cards, more of almost everything. There's very few factors that come into play. More invites. I can keep going. It's more of everything.
That is, Danielle just literally read down her exact list.
Why make a list?
It was perfect.
I added invites. Look at me improving and being spontaneous.
Woo, Danielle, Miss Spontaneous.
I know.
Yeah.
But it's hard, right? Because what happens? We have people, friends, family of family in our lives. And it's not always easy to say, well, we're just not going to invite that person or those people, right? We feel you, and we're on your side with this. We get it. Because when we say like, well, hey, save money by just not inviting all those people, it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
We recognize that.
And there's a whole other side of this where you also could say that there is smaller weddings that could have a bigger budget, or
100%. Smaller
weddings that don't necessarily mean that you're trying to do everything on the cheap or whatever. There's this episode 62 is what we did with Elisa Tong, and it's about, they used to be called maybe small weddings or an intimate wedding or whatever, but they call them micro weddings now, where it's a curated guest list, right? So if you think of a bullseye, right? Like you've got yourself, the two of you in the middle, and then maybe like one ring outside of that. Who's in that second ring? Maybe it's parents and wedding party and like those close people, right? Or parents and like close friends who would be the wedding party, or whoever's in that like first immediate family, that kind of thing. Maybe that's the micro wedding where you bring just that curated guest list and you create an amazing experience for them. So while you're not trying to go cheap with 10 people, maybe it's still an exciting, beautiful experience with them. And I'm thinking Lauren and Sean, who put, who had a fine budget for their wedding, but they didn't go off the rails with a 200-person wedding. It was still a beautiful, not extravagant affair, but do you know what I'm trying to say here?
Yeah, it was very elegant and very gorgeous.
Yeah, like what's the best way to describe that? Like it's still this like amazing experience where instead of spending $100 per person on 200 people, it's $150 on 10 people. Do you know what I mean? Or something like that.
Right.
Per person. You know what I mean? You don't understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, and that's not what Lauren and Sean spent. I don't want to share what they spent. But it does come down to the fact that it's just math. And guys, we try not to bring math up on this show because it stresses me out. But it is math. The more people you have, the more heads to feed, the more everything to accommodate with them. And it's just a factor in all of it. It is much easier if you're planning a wedding, let's say you're planning in the middle of downtown Philadelphia, right? To transport 10 people around is a much different ballgame than transporting 150 people. Do you know what I mean? Just that alone is thousands of dollars that you're talking about in difference. So again, we get it. It's not necessarily something where you need to start slashing, but if you're at the early stages and you're talking with your partner and you're saying, okay, who do we want to invite? Dream big and go all out, and then get realistic and say, okay, but what can we afford to invite? Because that is so important. You wouldn't throw a party at your house for 3,000 people if 3,000 people can't. Wow, that's an extreme number that I just
that was amazing.
Wow, I went there. But you wouldn't do it if you couldn't afford to keep to accommodate those people on a level of having someplace for them to be, having something for them to eat, and having something for them to drink. You have to be realistic when you approach it. And I think, gosh, it's something we talk about a lot, is that the wedding industry and the social avenues around weddings and planning a wedding, there's all this pressure to say like, oh, well, you have to invite all these people and it has to be this big party. And it does not. It needs to be whatever makes sense for you guys on every level possible.
Yeah. Well, imagine this. Like, what if I'm going to try to do a little math here, and I've been thinking about this math
Brace yourself.
as we're talking. Yeah, brace yourself.
Should I get out a calculator? I can check.
So like say, you have 200 people coming to your wedding, right? And you've got an average of $100 a plate. That's $20,000, right?
Nailed it.
Talking in zeros here. But say you said 10 people. That's what we want at our wedding, right? Like we could easily invite 200 people, but I have a cousin who obviously is part of my family. Our wedding had 150 people. Her wedding had 15 because it was just her parents, grandparents, and like his parents and like those very close people. And that's all good, whatever. But imagine if you had those same group of people and you said, we're going to do something really amazing. And you did $400 per person. $400 times 10 people is still only $4,000. Now, maybe that sounds more manageable, and having like this amazingly curated experience where you go to some fancy beach and have like this excursion where you're able to drive ATVs to where your reception is going to be. I don't know, like, you know what I mean?
Hang on, Grandma.
Things are getting crazy. Or you fly a helicopter in and then you rappel down into your ceremony. That would be amazing. But you get the point that I'm trying to make is that
terrifying.
Yeah, you can sometimes do a lot more with a little less people.
Yeah, and it just comes. That's what it comes down to. It's not often in our life that we plan parties where we send out invitations and we sort of hope that we get no responses, right? Isn't that like a very strange thing about planning a wedding? Because everybody that comes back, no, it's like, well, it saves us a couple $100 there, a couple $100.
Yep.
Shaving it off the list. So that's number one.
Okay, two.
Number two. Dan touched on it a little bit as we were introducing this episode, but we want you guys to make a budget, and we want you to get like down and dirty with spreadsheets.
Everything.
Get as realistic as possible. And then this is key. You need to stick to that budget.
Yeah. And everything, not just the big things, every little item that you can possibly think of, right? Like it's that little stuff is what adds up.
Yeah. And this is where we're going to talk about this in a little bit because this is one of those things, and don't come at me because I have reasons, but having a wedding planner on your team early will help in doing these stuff. But you have resources right now at your fingertips. First of all, you have Google, which give or take, there's good and bad information out there. But we specifically did episode 11, very early on, 60 episodes ago. That was, holy schmolies, that's nuts. Episode 11, we did about owning your wedding budget. And then we also did episode 21, which was the wedding budget part 2, where we jumped into a lot of this stuff. So we're trying to put as much good stuff out there for you guys, but it is so much about being realistic and just knowing that, okay, if we're like plus or minus here, how does that affect other things? But it's not just about putting numbers on like, okay, well, we only want to spend this on that. Because if it's not realistic, it's not going to help you at the end of the day.
For sure.
Dan gave you a good example of when you go grocery shopping.
Yep.
As a woman, I have certain vices, and one of those is Target. So just give me a second here. So when we're talking about budgets and all this stuff, I will often use my analogy of Target. And I feel like maybe people can relate. Maybe you can relate more on the grocery shopping one, but I want to share anyway. So when I go to Target, it's usually because I need one thing, like mascara, right? And I go in and I need my mascara. And first thing I do when I walk in, there's that like cute little thing that has all the cool like dollars and whatever stuff. And I'm like, well, I just have to look at this because some of it's pretty. And then it's like, oh, wait, while I'm here, let me grab a cart. So I get my cart.
For my mascara.
For my mascara, my little tube of mascara. And I like, okay, well, all right, cool. So maybe I find something there because whatever. And then I keep going. And then there's swimsuits. And yes, it might be December, but maybe I need a swimsuit because it's a good time to buy a swimsuit, right? Yeah,
it's cheaper
because then I'm ready for
You're
summer.
Saving money.
Up.
You're saving money at
maybe
that
I'm
point.
saving money, right? So then I get some clothes, and then I just make my way around the whole stupid store to get my way over to the makeup aisle where there's the actual mascara I need, which also probably has that new thing of nail polish that I also really want. But here's the thing. If everything I put into my cart as I put it in there totaled up, and I had like, okay, now you are going to pay this when you check out, you crazy loon, because all of this stuff costs money. If I had a number that every time I put that thing in the cart, it added up, I would be way more careful on what I'm adding and what I'm choosing to buy, because it's really easy to put it in your cart. And then by the time you get to the checkout line, you're committed to this like $200 bill because you feel like a turd being like, well, I really don't need half of this stuff. Let me put it back. At that point, it's too late, in my opinion. But what it comes down to is if you're keeping track as you go, you make decisions much differently. And it's the same way when you have a budget. If you go in and say, I am okay with spending $10 in Target today, and you go, okay, well, my mascara costs $6. I don't know what mascara costs right now. I don't know. Anyway, mascara costs $6. All right, I have $4. Do I want to like save that and like put it towards something else, maybe gas? Or do I want to get like a little snack from the checkout line or whatever it is? That's how you need to approach it. If we all approach Target that way, I'm telling you, Target would go out of business.
Yeah, for sure.
I've on people like me who just go in there and buy all the things that I do not need. So that's what it comes down to. It's having this like clear direction and a budget for what you need and what you're comfortable spending. And if you have a little extra, fine. If you spend a little over, you are aware of it from the get-go. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. I want to do number 3 because number 3 is it's easily one of my favorites, right? Like I feel like I find a way to mention this every single episode.
Be my guest.
Thank you for throwing me that bone. Number 3 is choose your priorities early on and focus your budget towards those items. That's it. So what do I mean by that? What do I mean by that? What do I mean by that?
You're right. Dan, what do you mean by that?
What do I mean by that? So if you back up and look at your wedding as the big picture, right? Like it's an opportunity that you are creating for your friends and family to come together under one roof for a happy reason, right? Like that's how Rachel and I, my wife and I, looked at this event. People were coming from all over the country. My wife's got a big family. I have a pretty big family who's local, but her family's all over the place. So we said this is an awesome opportunity for everybody to get together, to enjoy themselves, to have fun and party, right? So that was like number 1 is people are coming in. It's a time off. They're taking time out of their schedules to come here. They got to have a good time. So what did that mean to have for them to have a good time? Maybe a good curb appeal for the venue. It's kind of a cool experience being there. 2 is like somebody who's going to keep the dance floor packed. Now, some couples don't want to dance. That's fine. What's your other thing? Is it some entertainment for the couple? Like 2 weeks ago, I had a wedding on the 13th, and it was it ended up being a pretty crazy wedding, but the bride and groom did like during dinner they did a Sinatra singer who like came in, like did like his whole spiel, had like a cigarette and like the little cool hat and whatever. They did that. They had a caricaturist, 2 of them, come in and they did that. They also did a photo booth, and then they had a flash mob of waiters to get like the dance floor started. It was insane. And let me drop how this went down, because I forgot I never shared this with you, Danielle. It was like right after the cake, and they didn't want the cake to be like a big deal. So they did the cake, and then like as the cake is being like sort of wheeled off, a waiter comes walking through and drops a huge metal pan with all these forks on it. Like right in the, like walks right through this like horseshoe shape of people who are watching the cake cutting. And he drops this thing, and the forks scatter everywhere. And then the event manager's like, "You got to pick these up. Hurry up, pick these up." And some of the guests were like, "You don't have to yell at him. It's okay. It's fine." And so he gets up and he like stands out in the middle of the thing. He's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, everybody." And all of a sudden, like the band like comes in this thing, and he strikes a pose. And then like out of nowhere, people just like these other waiters who were not actually waiters. They were a dance team who were hired to be there, who were dressed as waiters and were actually waiting the staff or waiting the guests. It was amazing. They came in, they just started doing this like choreographed dance, like one at a time, and it just turned into this big thing. And then that was how the kind of like dance party started off. And it was insane. But so it was a slightly older crowd. It wasn't like, the 20s crowd. So they were trying to find ways to like keep people interested and active and engaged. So that was like what they said. They said that their whole thing was guest experience. So that was their number one. Same thing with me. Another one for a lot of people is photography, right? Like we wanted to make sure that we had great photographs of this amazing time of our lives. So as you're looking at the wedding as a whole, find these things that are super important to you and put maybe the largest chunks of your pie towards those things. Then you look at all these other little things that start adding up. And, this might be preposterous to some people, like flowers weren't that important to us, right? Some of my couples, flowers are the thing, right? Like that is it. Like I love flowers. My mom and I make our own, I made my own corsage when I was going to prom, whatever, right? They weren't that important to us, so I didn't even do boutonnieres. My wife had some really nice bouquets made, but and then for our actual wedding centerpieces, it was just the Beauty and the Beast single glass or single rose underneath a glass dome, right? So we just found ways like super clean and classy and pretty and not that expensive, because it just wasn't that important to us to have like big fancy centerpieces, because we wanted most people to be sitting out at the dance floor, or if they were sitting at the table, to be able to talk to each other back and forth across the table without this massive thing in the middle. And so we just started looking at these other things. We didn't spend a whole bunch of money on like the cake cutting things, which like I feel like that is one of those details I see pop up, like get this fancy cake cutting set for $250. It's like, what? I don't know. Anyway, the list goes on and on and on about all these things that you like have to have. But if you really look at them, it's like, what are the things that are going to be most important, right? Think about those. To you, exactly.
And your guest, yeah.
And your guest, and move from there. And then whatever, as you're going through the process, you remember those major things. It's almost like a mission statement, right? You look at that mission statement, and every decision you make and everything you think you need to buy, you hold it up to that mission statement. Does that make my guests have a better experience? Does that money allotted to that mean that, we're not going to be able to put it to somewhere else that's really important? So that's what I would say.
Yeah. And here's the thing, just to be really open, upfront, honest, transparent with you guys, as we always try to do. Wedding professionals are salespeople.
Yep, 100%.
We are in this business, the same as many other businesses, to upgrade and to sell things, ideally from a place of this would add a good thing to your event. But it's up to you as the consumer and the purchaser to say, yes, this is a good fit for us, or no, it's not. Same as if you go to a restaurant and you ordered the filet mignon and the server says, do you want to add mushrooms to that? And you either say yes or no, because you either like mushrooms or you don't. Dan does not like mushrooms. So he is making a face right now. I love mushrooms. I love a good fungus. So so that's what it comes down to but know that the wedding professionals in this industry are going to come at you with different things. That's like, oh, well, would you like to also add this? And you go, oh gosh, well, maybe that would be nice. Or you go, well, I don't know, maybe. And then they're going to try and show you all the ways that it's going to be really nice. So it's up to you to kind of navigate those waters. But I would say to challenge everything. Do we really need and want this? Is this really what we want? Is this really a good idea for us? Or am I just being pressured into it and I feel bad saying no? Because it is totally okay to be like, oh, that's a cool idea, but I don't think so. No, thank you.
Yep.
And it is okay.
Yeah, challenge I don't think is the best word, but I would say analyze.
Challenge. Well, I mean, like challenge the idea to yourself of like, am I doing this because challenge the thought you're having, because you're going to start saying, well, gosh, we really would like to do that upgraded signature drink package. But like maybe is the bar, like most of our guests don't drink. So maybe it's okay that we don't do this upgraded signature bar package just because it would be nice to have, I don't know, whatever.
Or if the majority of people are going to drink wine and beer anyway.
Exactly. So, yes.
Awesome. Okay. All right. I don't know. Maybe I should do this next one.
Go for it.
No,
I
definitely
challenge you
not.
to do it.
Number 4 is hire a wedding planner. Danielle, take it away.
Okay, hang on with me, guys. This is not just a shameless plug. Oh my gosh, I literally just talked about wedding professionals selling you on stuff, and now I'm like, and you should hire a wedding planner. Wow, I'm a big old turd.
Good setup for yourself, Danielle.
No, hear me out. Okay, I've said it before. I stand by it 100%. It is why I do what I do. But when you have a really good and honest and wonderful and loving and compassionate and respectful wedding planner on your team, they are going to be worth their weight in gold. And while, yes, it is an investment, ideally that person is going to save you a ton, from costly mistakes to just things that you're not knowing you don't know. And that's okay, because they're going to ideally go through everything with a fine-tooth comb and just make sure that you aren't being double charged for something, or they're just going to make sure that everything checks out really efficiently, and they are going to save you so much time. Sometimes they can use their connections to get you discounts or just added value stuff. That really depends on a ton of different factors, but having that person on your team is one of those investments that you make that comes around long term, and just saves you a ton. I am that person. I actually just did an Instagram story on this a little bit ago. I have a wedding coming up the end of next month, and they are working with this beautiful vineyard to have their event at. It is gorgeous. It's got a garden, tent, whole thing. But they have to bring in an outside caterer. And this caterer has been there many times before. We all sat down a few weeks ago and had this lovely conversation about all these things. This outside caterer also brings in rentals from another company. So we have a venue, a caterer, and a rental company, all 3 people that should be kind of all working together. And they are, but it's 3 separate vendors that this couple has to look at and manage. When I came on board a few months ago, I took all of that information and really went through it all, so that when we had our meeting and our sit down, we were able to go through all this stuff and say, well, okay, they're not doing, in this couple's case, they're not doing a sit down dinner. So we don't need all these waiter tray stands on this rental thing. And the event caterer went, oh, you're right, we don't. Let's take them off. And we said, okay, well, we're not doing a champagne toast anymore at the table. People are just going to toast with what they have. They still had champagne flutes rented and listed on the rental list. And the rental list was 2 pages long, very fine print, all detailed out. And they're like, oh, whoops, you're right. We can take that off. I don't know if the couple would have noticed that stuff or not, but I went through that thing and there was about 10 different edits that I went back to them and was like, hey, I think we need to tweak this. This probably shouldn't be there. Just little things like that. And the couple wrote me an email. They're like, thank you so much. I don't think we would have caught that stuff. So it's like, that's the stuff that having a really solid wedding planner on your team ideally is going to help you with, so that you don't have to make sure. And that caterer had good intentions. They were not out to get that couple or do anything ill will. It's just what it is. So
I think one of the things about a wedding planner is It's like one of those things like you don't know what you don't know, right? Like you can put together an amazing wedding yourself. Lots of people do it, right? Like, of course, but this is going to be a weird analogy, but it's almost like having cataract surgery, or maybe even better, like what's that LASIK surgery, where it's like, you see the world through like your eyes now, and they're great, and like life is good, but then you have this thing where all of a sudden you see so much clearer, and you realize that like what it could have been. What? Danielle's looking at me like,
of all things, cataract surgery. So relatable, Dan. Yes,
it is. But it's like literally like a thing where it's like you're going through life and you only know it this one way. But you don't know what you don't know. And all of a sudden this other thing happens. And there's no way to know if you're having a wedding and planning yourself. And you can, right? Like, Danielle and I through this whole podcast are always saying, do what's right for you, do what's in your budget, blah, 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 blah. But it's one of those things where like, it's just so helpful. And I know Danielle and I, when we hired her, we were not really friends at that. Like we had worked together a couple times, but we were not like hanging out at that point. Do you remember that? Correct. 2015, really after the wedding is when you came down. You guys came down the first time, and we were making the Harry Potter wands and like all that kind of stuff. That's when we really became friends. I just knew you from being like a really hard worker, for having like a very personal business that you take personally as well. You know what I mean? I mean that in the most endearing way possible. And just like being overly gracious and generous with your time and understanding and knowledge for all of your clients. And there are other wedding planners, but but the point I'm trying to make is that like hiring a wedding planner is just like this thing that helps you to actually enjoy everything that's going on in a whole new way. That makes sense.
A whole new way. Dan, thank you very much. I will Venmo you your money for that lovely ad after this episode. No, I agree. So.
Okay. All right. Number 5.
Shall we move on?
Let's move on.
Okay.
All right. After you.
So this comes down to, again, one of those things that helps if you're early on in the process. But one of the big ways to save money is if you pick a venue that doesn't require a lot of decor or added rentals that need to be brought in, like tables and chairs, bathroom trailers. The more that's included by nature in your venue rental, typically the less you're going to spend overall. Just what it comes down to. On-property weddings have many couples thinking that they're going to save thousands of dollars on rental fees and venue fees. And it is very, very often more expensive to have a venue or to have a wedding on your property than at a venue. And we talk about this episode 17. We're going back to a lot of old episodes here. But awesome. Episode 17, planning a backyard wedding, we get down and dirty with it.
So many details you got to figure out. Whew. So many.
Yeah. So let's just use example. If you've just got a grassy area and you're like, we are going to save so much money by having this wedding in this beautiful grassy area.
No, you're not. Tents. You talk about like, all right, a big, huge tent, super expensive.
Yep. All the tables, all of the linens.
Yep. Where are the caterers going to cook? So you have to like find a way to bring in ovens in and water and bathrooms and power and generators. Yeah.
There's one wedding we're doing in September where we have to bring in convection oven stoves, heat racks, propane, because to cook the food, the couple is having to rent everything for this caterer, which is a whole other story. But bathrooms.
Yep.
Power. You need to be able to power all this stuff. If you can't power it through what you have at your property, you need to bring in generators.
Parking is the most brutal thing. Like, if you have 150 people at a backyard house wedding, where are you going to put 100 cars?
Right. Exactly. Or how about just lighting the space? You have to light the space. You have to light the space around the space. You have to light the space where the cars are parked. Because if it's nighttime when they're walking back to their cars,
they're going to step in a groundhog hole.
Yeah, groundhog hole. I call them unicorn holes because I'm terrified of what actually lives in the holes, and I prefer unicorns. Garbage. Like, what are you going to do with all this waste and garbage that's left after the wedding? There's just wear and tear on your property. There's so much to consider. And maybe you're like, yeah, and we are ready. We are ready to do this and knock it out of the park. Go for it. But the more that you choose a venue that doesn't require a lot of stuff, and maybe you're getting married in a beautiful garden area for your ceremony, right? That just means the less flowers and all this stuff that you have to bring in to make it as beautiful as you want it to be.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. All right,
Yeah.
Dan, you take the next one.
The next one actually, I feel like is really obvious, but maybe it's not so obvious. And that's to have your wedding any other day than a Saturday. Shoot, even a Thursday. Like, Thursday weddings I feel like they're becoming more popular. And not just like a very small, like simple wedding. I'm talking like big blowout Thursday weddings. Especially if it works butts up against a holiday weekend or like one of those kind of deals. But yeah, any other day than a Saturday.
Yeah, we recently, Dan and I attended a wedding that happened the day after 4th of July. So 4th of July this year was on a Thursday. The wedding was a Friday. We all made a long weekend out of it and had a really great time. And it was super smart. And they probably saved a ton of money by having it Friday versus Saturday. And even if you're like, we need to do it Saturday, it is what it is, consider doing something during the day or during the afternoon. Think about it from a different perspective of, yeah, but like, oh, everybody wants a Saturday evening wedding. Think about it like this. Wake up, have a great morning, get married, have a beautiful lunch with everybody. Just it being lunch alone is going to save you money. And then everything wraps up and you have the whole evening to like chill, relax, maybe grab dinner with your close friend. Like, think of how that day can unfold much differently in a way that works really well for you and your budget.
Yo, I'll do Friday weddings all day, every day. Well, I mean, I literally couldn't do that, but like, I love Friday weddings because, listen, like everybody loves a long weekend, and a lot of people are looking for an excuse to take a day off. You know what I mean? Like, there's like there was some study or something done recently about how many PTO and vacation hours people just keep racking up because they don't use them. They feel like they just like can't take the time off or one thing or another. Give people a reason to take a day off, have your wedding on a Friday, and then get shwasted, or just enjoy the time with your people, and then you have the whole weekend to recover, or hang out, or leave for your honeymoon, or whatever, right? And you get to save a smidge of money, probably by having your wedding on a Friday anyway. Love Friday weddings.
Yeah, and we talked about it going back to episode 62, the micro weddings episode we did with Elisa Tong. She flat out said, like, you can probably afford to work with an entire dream team of vendors just by it happening on a weekday versus a primetime weekend date, because by nature, there's only so many days that were available. So Fridays and Sundays are good, better than Saturday. Mondays through Thursdays are even better because it's just the less likely that a venue or vendor is going to make money on that date. So they're going to usually be able to work with you on certain things. So if you think of days like real estate, Saturdays by nature are just limited in their prime property.
Yep.
You know?
I had a Tuesday wedding last year. It was amazing.
That's awesome. As far as I'm concerned, I would do that all day long. Like you said, never
Fridays.
mind.
Love Fridays. Yeah. Anyway. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Next. 7? Are we at 7 already? What?
We are at 7.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Go for it.
Mm-hmm. So this way you're going to save money is by having your ceremony and your reception in the same location. This very much goes back to the venue as well as what you're picking, but it's automatically going to save you money. Now, if you belong to a church or have a spot that you've always known you've wanted to get married in, then by all means have your ceremony there, guys. It is okay. You have our permission. But if you're on the fence about where your ceremony should be, your most cost-effective option is almost always the same spot as your reception, because this is going to save you on decor. Things can be repurposed and go a lot farther. It's going to save you on transportation. Once you're there, you do not have to worry about getting yourselves, your wedding party, your guests to another place and then back at the end. It all just kind of takes place in one space. It adds a ton of value for the time you need for your vendors. So most of your day of vendors are there based on hours, photo, video, etc. Most of those people are there based on a certain number of hours of coverage that they're going to provide for you. Any time spent traveling, and I cannot speak for everybody here, but most vendors work this way. Any time spent traveling counts in those hours. Now, not necessarily traveling to and from before and after your wedding, but time spent traveling during the day. So if you're going to the church and then you're driving someplace else and then you're driving someplace else and you're driving someplace else, your photographer that time driving, they're not taking photos, which is okay, but that's what you hired them to be there for. So it's not the best use of time. This is how you're going to save money there. What else is there? Delivery fees. More locations you have, more fees. And the more time you're spending traveling is the less time you're spending with the people that have traveled in. Too much words on traveling, but you know what I mean. I've gotten there to see you guys. So,
yeah. Okay. Number 8.
Last but not least.
Yeah. There's this is like the ideal, somewhere that you can literally stay there. So lodge on site, have your ceremony on site, and your reception on site. That would be amazing. And there are a couple places I can think of, but this one specifically is about like finding a venue where lodging is either on site or very, very close.
Yeah, because it's just going to save you on all the things we just talked about.
What,
time, travel, time, transportation, all the things. Plus, it makes for a great experience. Think you can like extend the togetherness of the whole weekend of events without having to worry about like, well, how are we going to get people there and how are we going to let them know to go there? I'm telling you, it just takes care of so many things.
That is the one thing that I like about a lot of the city weddings that I do, where like literally the church is 2 blocks from where they got the hotel they got ready in, and the reception is 3 blocks from the church. It's like, and there's just like they're all like in a little triangle, and they can just walk between them or take Ubers or whatever. But most of the guests walk, and I love that. It's super simple. Mm-hmm. Nailed it.
All right, so before we wrap up this episode, I want us to talk about maybe even more importantly, what you should not try to save money on. Come at me, bro.
Okay. First thing. Wait, am I going to like loft these up to you and you're going to talk about why?
You could do whatever you like, girlfriend.
Okay.
You host this podcast too, Dan.
I know, but you're the brains. I'm just the comedic
and
relief.
The beauty. True.
All right. DIY flowers. Why is that not a good idea?
It's not. Next. No. So I think a lot of people, even we have ringers write to us and say, hey, I really want to DIY my flowers. Why do you guys always say not to do it? And this is what it comes down to. If you work with flowers all the time, then you know what it takes to work with them. However, when you're getting married, you have a ton of stuff on your plate that last week of your wedding. You're just getting pulled in a lot of different directions. Plus, you have everybody coming in. By nature, flowers have a limited shelf life. It's not something you can do well in advance. Now, if you're DIYing your centerpieces and they're silk flowers or something not floral, fresh, whatever, go for it. As long as you can do it weeks, months in advance. But flowers by nature need love and attention, and a lot of love and attention in those final days and hours before your wedding. And sometimes I would argue that something else should be getting your love and attention, not these flowers. Okay. They need to be cleaned. They need to be assembled. They need to be stored. They need to be kept in water. They need to be kept in a fridge just to keep them cool. Florists have these huge walk-in things that they just store everything in, and makes it so easy for you that you don't have to worry about it. If your day is super hot, the florist is going to time their delivery ideally, and they better, so that the flowers aren't sitting in a hot bit of sun all day long. You don't have that luxury when you're getting married. You're getting pulled in 27 different directions, and it is just a lot of work. I worked for a florist for a very limited time to kind of get a good idea of how the whole process works. I was blown away, and I've worked in this industry for years at that point. I was blown away at how much time and care and energy and all this stuff went into making these flowers beautiful.
Yep.
So yes.
I think that extends to anything that's going to take your attention away from enjoying time with your friends and family in those final days, right? I mean, Rachel and I did a DIY pretzel dipping thing at the right before. It was like pretzel rods, and we had to melt the chocolate, and that was our gifts to our all of our guests. It was the favors, and to do like 300 pretzels took a long time. And granted, it ended up being fun because we made a mess of everything, and we had cousins in helping us. It was like kind of silly, right? We did it like the day before our wedding because it was obviously chocolate and pretzels, but like that was one thing that like kind of worked out. But we also could have been doing other things, right? Like getting together with other people, or like welcoming other guests who were coming into town that week. But it's a give and take, right? And you have to figure out what that is. If you're okay with some of these things, like we were okay with that because it was just pretzels, it was just some chocolate, we were getting messy, and we got to eat some of it as we were doing it anyway. So totally great reward. But there are many things that, like, if you start thinking about it, now you're like, oh my gosh, I would love to do this amazing project, right? I'm gonna do blah, and all of a sudden it's a week before your wedding, and you've got a whole bunch of floral mason jars to wrap in burlap with some pretty ribbon and some other things, and you've got to do 20 of them, and you've also got the timeline to figure out and the seating chart to figure out and all these other things. It's like, when are you going to do this? And then something falls off, and then it feels frustrating, blah, blah, blah. DIY anything that gets left to that last week, that last couple days is just brutal.
Mm-hmm. Because it's just adds stress.
It does.
Okay?
Yep.
All right. Now, another thing that I want you guys to not try to save money on, and I guess I want to explain this better, is I don't want you guys to provide a cheap experience. And cheap in the way of it being obvious that you're doing anything in your power to save money as possible, and by skimping on the overall guest experience for the sake of skimping. So there is nothing wrong with having disposable plates and dishes and hot dogs served at your wedding, as long as you are setting your guests up for that experience. It's going to be a more casual get together. We're going to make it picnic style and good. If you ask guests to show up in tuxedos and ball gowns, and you serve them a hot dog on a paper plate, unless that's the theme you're going for, that's providing a cheap experience for the sake of saving money. So you want to approach it, and this is what we've harped on and gone back to right from the very beginning, is that what are you comfortable investing in the wedding, and what are the ways you can make that money go as far as possible and invest in quality products and services to provide this experience that your guests deserve. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean that they need to be served lobster and filet mignon. It just needs to be a quality experience for them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Another one that I'm pretty passionate about, I know you are as well, is hiring cheap or inexperienced vendors. Like, one of the things that is always difficult when I hear, and it's one of these things, again, where it's like, you don't know what you don't know, is when somebody's just like, oh, I'm just going to, we got a college student to do the pictures. And it's like, okay, do your thing. Because, I respect them enough to obviously to let them have their choice, but also I just know how much hinges on this, right? Like, there's so many pictures that, like, if you get your collection back and you're like, oh, why didn't I have a picture of my grandmother sitting at the table? Well, it's like most people aren't thinking about that. They're thinking about, like, oh my gosh, this is like the party of your life. It's going to be great. And all of a sudden you get all these pictures back, and it's just pictures of, like, people dancing on the dance floor or being silly. And it's like, well, what about those pictures that, like, actually, like, really mean something? The ones that, like, in 10 years are going to be the most meaningful pictures, not like, somebody pouring beer on themselves on the dance floor. You know what I mean? And it's like, I can speak from experience. A lot of young photographers will do that. They follow the action of the wedding day, but there's all these sidelines pictures that like, it's really easy to get distracted away from. The dance floor being one of them. Everybody loves, like, if you look at a lot of photographers' websites, including mine, the action, the couple enjoying themselves, the getting wrapped up in the day. That's great, but the rest of that wedding collection, the rest of that wedding collection is that real stuff, the stuff that doesn't make the blog, but is the stuff that if it wasn't there, I'd be getting a phone call.
Right. What it comes down to is, we're not saying you have to choose the top cost, whatever vendor. It's about investing what you're comfortable in, but going the route of, well, we're just going to pick the cheapest whatever based off of nothing else at all, often yields more stress, more disappointment, and more expectations not being met. Because anytime someone lacks experience, they lack everything that Dan just said. An experienced photographer knows to look around the room and look at other things that are happening, and not just at what's happening on the dance floor.
Right. And there are, this is, I'm going to try to not contradict myself here, even though it's going to sound like it. There are, like, sometimes when people are just starting out, and this is one of those things where, like, you have to feel it out, right? Like, you have to talk with as many photographers as possible and, like, see who fits you. Because I know when I was starting out, I was hungry, right? Like, I wanted to make this work out. It's the best way I can describe it. Like, I wanted to crush it for every single couple. This was not like just me, like, I wanted to go into wedding photography. This is where I was going to lead my path down. That's why I'm in it 10 years later. Do you know what I'm saying? And so, I was going out of my way to like make sure I understood what people really wanted and how I could take it to the next level, even starting day one. So when you meet with, all these different people, some are in different budget ranges, whatever, you'll get that feeling from them. And if they're on the lower end and and they fit in your budget and they're like a little newer, you'll be able to, I think you'd be able to hopefully feel that they're going to really push it for you and they're trying to make this something they want to do, etc. So, yeah.
And guess what, too? If photography is the least important thing to you on your wedding day,
yep,
you are allowed to say, we're just going to hire somebody that they're going to come and take a few pictures during the ceremony. That's all we want.
Yep.
And move on. That's okay. We don't let us talk you out of that. It's just if you go into wedding photography with the expectation of having something that you can submit to Style Me Pretty or Green Wedding Shoes, and you hire somebody that does not have the experience or wherewithal to handle that, that's where Dan and I are trying to educate you that's so important to have that information. That's why we do this podcast, guys. Dan and I put out this podcast so you can have this information so that every time we say you don't know what you don't know, you go, oh, I know that now. Yeah. Now I'm a better consumer and I'm going to plan this wedding like a rock star. Right. A+ gold star stickers all around. Okay.
There's I don't want to compare and contrast, right? But like, there's things where like
let's compare and contrast.
All right. So if you're having a big fancy super crazy wedding in Center City, that's super baller, and you don't, and I'm just going to speak to photography because that's obviously what I know. If you want somebody who's going to showcase that and you spend, a really low super budget photographer, you're not going to get this what you would hope for, right? But what you said before, Danielle, was like if you're just having like something super simple, like I have friends who just had like a small backyard wedding with like 20 of their friends, and like some of my friends who I went to college with are photographers. They snapped a couple pictures of the couple looking at the camera, a quick little father-daughter dance. Maybe they got 20 pictures from the wedding, and they love it. That's exactly what they want. And I'm not trying to contradict myself, but it's like it's all about your expectations, right? Photography is important, but it was not the most important thing. They weren't having a big. The whole wedding budget was probably $5,000. Right. So there's like give and takes. I think as long as everything is kind of in line, you're good to go. Right.
Dan and I could probably make an argument, or at least I know I could, as to why every aspect of your wedding could be the most important part of your wedding.
Truth.
From everything from your invitations to the vehicle that you're transporting your guests on, I could make an argument for every single one of them. Yep. So it's up to you to decide what the hierarchy is for you.
Yes.
Because there is no right or wrong. It's just what makes sense for you guys. All right.
All right, move
One
on.
last thing I want to talk about. This is our last thing, guys, and then you get to move on with your day, I guess. But and I guess we should have talked about this earlier. But anyway, I wish we ended kind of at that, but it is what it is. So I want you guys to be cautious. So Dan and I talked earlier about having your wedding any day but a Saturday evening, right? There are also venues that offer on and off season rates. Okay, so if you get married during their peak busy season, it's one rate. If you get married during their off season, it's a more affordable rate to get married there. Now, in some cases, they're doing it just because they're less likely to book that date. All fine, good, go for it. However, in other cases, it's because the venue is not set to run as well in those off-season times. So if you're choosing a venue that's very much outside and you live in a place of the world where there's only a certain range of months where it is nice to be outside, and you go, well, we're just going to push it a little and get married off-season and save a bunch of money, you often run a much higher risk that it's going to kind of not go as well. So right. I have a story to share, but basically if it comes down to weather, you just run a higher risk of your guests not being able to travel for your date or just not being able to be comfortable where they're at. I had one couple, they chose to have their date outside of peak season, and they chose to have it in a place that is tented in November in Pennsylvania. Now, in Pennsylvania, you can have kind of a sunny 70-degree day in November, but you can also have a 30-degree day, no sweat. Yeah. And on this day in particular, it was probably a negative 10-degree day. Ooh. It was frigid. Everybody was in this tent. We were not expecting it. All heaters were brought in, but it just was not enough to keep everything warm and cozy. And unfortunately, what ended up happening is, in this case, it was not the end of the world. We just kind of wrapped things up early and they moved back to the hotel where they can just kind of celebrate in the lobby. But everything that they invested and put into the wedding was kind of left back at the venue. Everybody was still together and had a great time, and it is what it is. But it stunk in the sense of they just banked on it being a really nice day. And I wish the venue didn't even give them the option, but they did. So it is what it is. But
yeah, that's a crazy one.
Anything else, Ian, that you have on this?
I was just thinking the opposite, right? Like sometimes those July weddings are nice and like pretty good, but like if you've had a wedding like this past couple weeks in Pennsylvania, it's brutal outside. Like I had a wedding outside a couple years ago, early July, and July gets hot here, obviously, but this one was particularly difficult, and there was no option for an indoor ceremony, and it was 107 outside real temperature. So then with the heat index, it was like 115 outside in full sun, not shade, no tents, nothing. And everybody was sweating through their garments, was sweating through their, I had a gray suit on thinking like, oh, gray won't attract as much heat. I sweat. It looked like I jumped in the pool. Like I sweat through my suit. Oh, it was brutal. But yeah, everybody's got stories like that. Some of them you can't figure out if it's going to happen. It's just luck of the draw. But know that if you have a wedding in December or July, you might get snow or you might get a 107-degree day.
Right.
Yeah.
Is what it is.
Done. Cool.
All right.